Hey, good morning, all. Some folks might join us, but I'm just going to kick everything off this morning. I am Courtney Haverlick from Fairbanks, Alaska, with 21st Century Programs, and I am very honored to be the room host today for the Engineering Mindsets session, from research to practice, and an amazing panel of experts in the field that you will hear from today. I just have a few things to mention before we get started. I would like to invite you to please use the chat box as we go through the session. You can go ahead and click on it in your toolbar if it's not live now. You can post questions and ideas. We encourage you to introduce yourself. There are going to be some links coming up throughout the session, so you're going to want to go ahead and keep an eye to the chat so that you can have access to some different resources and activities that are going to be happening. I would please encourage you to leave your mute button on throughout so we don't have background noise throughout the presentation. If you could please leave yourself on mute so that we could really clearly hear each of our awesome speakers for today. The link to our conference agreements, again, just those norms of being kind and keeping things youth focused, are all on our main conference page if you need to refresh those. At the end of our session, so at 11:30 Alaska time, which most of our presenters are not in our time zone, but there's going to be a 20-minute Q&A to end. And so the session will be an hour, and then you'll have 20 minutes to really, pick the brains of these experts in our field. And if you have a question, please feel free to message me privately if there's a way it can help, or if you're having technical issues, we do have folks on that can help with that as well. So let me please introduce our presenters today. Sabrina Gomez is the founder and principal consultant at STEM Hire LLC, an educational consulting firm that seeks to transform the education and life outcomes for Black and Latino youth. As a consultant with the STEM Next Opportunity Fund, she leads a community of practice at the 50 state after-school networks, providing technical assistance to network leaders and supporters, and supports the design and implementation of the Million Girl Moonshot Initiative. And congratulations, we have a few Alaska recipients, and I think I see your names in the chat. So you are connected with the person really responsible for that support here in Alaska. So thank you, Ms. Gomez. And then Mrs. Judith Ahumada is the Director of Community Partnership at Technovation. She onboards and supports Technovation's domestic and international education programs from schools, after-school programs, libraries, and nonprofits. Additionally, she supports the development and improvement of programs for girls and families to solve problems through using cutting-edge technologies. Previously, she's managed and directed out-of-school programs at ARC After School and Experimental Education in LA, and she's passionate about unleashing girls' potential. And also welcome Amy Kim. Amy is the Chief Operating Officer at Technovation. She is a scientist turned nonprofit leader who is passionate about bringing engaging hands-on STEM education and opportunities to underrepresented communities in the US and globally. She is able to build innovative programs and strategies, develop strong partnerships with corporations and funders, and also develop strong mission-driven teams. Previously, she managed STEM programming at Girl Scouts in LA and directed a female science mentorship program at USC. As you can see, we are very honored to have some amazing folks presenting today on STEM from practice. They are going to talk about the 10 critical practices of the engineering mindset. You can expect some hands-on engaging activities in this session, and they're also going to share with us their best practice. So welcome all, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. And my colleagues and I are so excited to be here, and we're really looking forward to exploring some of the elements of an engineering mindset. I think we can all agree that now more than ever, We need to create a generation of innovative problem solvers and thinkers. And we hope that this webinar will help you better understand and accomplish that in your after-school programs. So our agenda for today, so we have three main goals. So the first is we're going to kind of dive into some of those engineering mindsets and really help you situate engineering within the STEM disciplines. We're going to explore some of those engineering mindsets, what they mean, what they are, and then give you some resources and some tools to explore further on your own. Then I'll turn it over to my colleagues at Technovation, who are a Moonshot implementation partner, and they will lead us through an engineering design challenge that really highlights some of the engineering mindset practices that I will review and go over. And as Courtney mentioned throughout the session, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you'd like to share your own resources with us and all of the participants, please do not hesitate to use the chat box function. And then we'll make sure to get to those questions during the Q&A period. So first, the Million Girls Moonshot. So the Million Girls Moonshot is a national initiative led by STEM Next Opportunity Fund and the Intel Foundation. And it aims to cultivate 1 million more girls with an engineering mindset. And with our very ambitious goal, with the support of implementation partners like Technovation and many others, and with support from the 50 state after-school networks, and many of you programs and providers and staff on the ground, we will achieve that goal. And Courtney, if you can drop in the chat the website link to the Million Girls Moonshot so you all can learn more, and also the link to the STEM Next website where you will be able to find all of the Million Girls Moonshot resources and frameworks, and even some engineering design challenges there on our site. Thank you, Courtney, for that. But first, let's kind of get our STEM hats on. So in the chat box, what comes to mind when you think of STEM in after-school settings? So just drop your ideas in the chat box. What comes to your mind when you think of STEM in after-school settings? We'll just give you about 30 seconds. Great, I see creating, problem solving, definitely hands-on twice. Great, doing, engineering. We have folks that have done the spaghetti and marshmallow tower challenges, I see. Yes, critical thinking, robotics. So it looks like most of you are comfortable with the chat function and also have a firm understanding of what comes to mind when you think of STEM in after school. But now let's pivot to the S and the E in STEM, so science and engineering. Now these are two disciplines within STEM, but they are slightly different. And when we think of science and when we think of engineering, something that helps me distinguish between the two is thinking about what is the goal of the activity. So as a scientist or in science, scientists seek to describe, or they are explaining, or they are predicting the natural world and its physical properties, right? You, in your after school program, you might see youth, describe the steps of the water cycle, or you might see youth trying to explain why it is that some objects float while other objects sink. Right? That's science. But engineers have a slightly different goal. Now, engineers really take their knowledge of science and really apply it to either designing maybe new processes, maybe building solutions or generating or building new technologies that address a specific problem that we see or meet a specific need. Now, you might, in your after school program, you might see youth applying their knowledge of forces to build a bridge to transport goods from point A to point B. Or you might see youth in your after school program design a water filtration process to clean water, right? These are activities that our youth and engineers do. Now we're going to play just a little game to test your knowledge between the two before we go on. And don't worry, it won't be graded or anything like that. So science or engineering? So I'm going to put a series of examples on your screen. And when you see the examples, type an S in the chat box if you think that this is the work of a scientist, or an E if you think this is the work of an engineer. Okay, so S or E. How about develop a stain-resistant material? Is this the work of a scientist or is this the work of an engineer? Great, I see a lot of E's. You are correct. This is the work of an engineer because they are applying their knowledge to develop, right, an entirely new material to meet a specific need. How about detail the process by which caterpillars become butterflies? Is this the work of a scientist or work of an engineer? You all are on it. SSS, correct. This is the work of a scientist. How about predict where earthquakes are most likely to occur? Is this the work of a scientist or is this the work of an engineer? Great, this is the work of a scientist, making predictions with prior knowledge. And last one, how about designing a hair dryer that uses 50% less energy? S or E? Very good. So this is the work of an engineer, right? Applying their knowledge of energy to design something new and to meet a specific need, not only for the environment, but us as individuals. Great. Now let's look at this. So 10 practices of an engineering mindset. So the Million Girls Moonshot, so we are working with Dr. Christine Cunningham, and she was the former developer and created the curriculum Engineering is Elementary and Engineering is Everywhere out of the Museum of Boston, the Museum of Science in Boston. But now we are working with her on this 10 practices of an engineering mindset. So you'll notice some of these, I won't read them, but you can find this again on that on the link that Courtney shared to the STEM Next Million Girls Moonshot Toolkit. And you'll be able to read more about these features of an engineering mindset. Now, these are the kinds of pattern behavior that create new engineering knowledge and products. So we're going to dive into about 4 of these. But again, if you go to that website, the STEM Next Million Girls Moonshot Toolkit, you'll be able to read about all of these practices after this session. So the first, so using a systematic problem-solving process. Now, if you ask an engineer what's at the core of what they do, most will probably say that they solve problems, right? They problem solve. But engineers don't just solve problems in any kind of willy-nilly type of way, right? They use a systematic and iterative process that can be generalized into a series of phases they call the engineering design process. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen slightly different variations of the engineering design process. Some may have 7 steps instead of 5, or some may be labeled slightly different. But what's important here is being able to identify and to use an engineering design process that is really age appropriate for your youth and the students that you're working with. Um, and of course, it helps scaffold, an engineering design process helps scaffold the learning and the doing. So you'll see the different stages on your screen, from being able to define a problem, right? Once they identified a problem, youth will be able to plan their solution to meet that specific problem. And then there's always a building and an iterative phase to the process. The second engineering mindset practice is considering real world problems. So another property that engineers design solutions for specific real world problems, right? They consider the context and the background and the needs of a specific client, and even the implications of the solution on the world. Now, research shows that children, particularly girls and students from underrepresented groups, are more interested and motivated when they're able to connect their learning to the real world, when they're able to answer why. Why is it that I'm doing this? So we believe engineering design challenges should be rooted in the context, in their real world, in their community. And this might look different for different age groups. For example, for younger learners, a book with a familiar face on it might be a way to really ground the engineering design challenge. And as you move into upper elementary and middle school, you might turn to videos or news articles that might help you ground the engineering design challenge. Another engineering mindset is that engineers envision multiple solutions, right? They think innovatively and they brainstorm multiple solutions to just one problem. They compare the effectiveness of their designs, and they make informed recommendations for open-ended problems. It's important here to recognize that the problems that engineers solve usually have many, many ways, right? Multiple solutions for this one specific problem. And it's important to help students recognize that there isn't just, one answer, one right way to solve a specific problem. It's also important here to make sure to encourage youth to bring in their background knowledge, right? Their experiences, their cultures, and their interests to a specific problem that they're trying to solve. And lastly, the fourth engineering mindset that we'll get to today is persisting through failure. So real engineers know this and embrace this. And I think sometimes, particularly for youth, but even adults, it's difficult sometimes to embrace and lean into failure. But engineers learn from their failures. They revise and then they improve upon their solutions. Now, this requires perseverance and improving through multiple iterations. So it's really important to help foster and create an environment where kids are okay with maybe not getting it right the first time, or maybe even the second time, and being able to celebrate that and then also learn and redirect, right, to reiterate. So I know we've kind of gone through that very quickly, but I really want to get you all into being engineers yourselves, into building with my colleagues at Technovation. So just as a review, so we went through 4 of the engineering mindset practices. The full 10 could be found on the Million Girls Moonshot website for you to explore further. Oh. And we'll take questions kind of at the end, or I'll answer some in our chat box now. But now I'd like to turn it over to Judy and Amy at Technovation. And Technovation, again, is one of our implementation partners in the Moonshot Initiative. And we're so lucky to have them.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen? let me put it on present mode. So who are we? Who is Technovation? What is Technovation? We are so excited to be participating with STEM Next and the Million Girls Moonshot Initiative. We are a global education nonprofit. Our goal really is to develop the 21st century learning skills, social emotional skills, using science. So we work with scientists and engineers to develop our design challenges, which we'll jump into in a little bit, and use science and these design challenges to develop these skills in young people, persistence, everything that Sabrina was just talking about, persisting through failure, presenting open-ended challenges for youth so that they can begin to exercise their creativity and problem-solving skills. One of the programs that we want to introduce to you today is our program called Curiosity Machine. Curiosity Machine is an online STEM learning platform, and it hosts a catalog of design challenges, all sorted through in different topics, different subjects. And we'll jump in to just take a look at some of the design challenges that we have available. If you're not familiar with design challenges, and this is a picture from our website, so we have a lot of design challenges that are available to you to use with your group. These are hands-on projects. Again, they're inspired by the work of by the cutting edge work of scientists and engineers. We've actually partnered, as you're seeing on our on my screen here, with industry partners such as Boeing to develop some of our design challenges. One of the focuses that we wanted to make sure we didn't move away from was making these design challenges accessible to people from around the world. As I mentioned earlier, we are a global nonprofit education and tech education nonprofit. And one of the things that we know for sure is that all educators are facing different challenges wherever they're at in the world. So one of the things that we've kept really in focus when developing our program was to use very simple materials. And now more than ever, now that everyone's working from home and connecting from home, it's really difficult to get materials out to students. So this is something that's very easy to be able to use to incorporate in programs or sessions that you're already running. The design challenges are also easily scalable, so you can make them more difficult or more easy, and we'll go into all of that as well. And all of our design challenges are open-ended. There is not just one solution to our design challenges. So this gives a wide opportunity for students to be able to exercise, again, their creativity and problem-solving skills. Yeah, one of the big things of the design challenges is helping students become a little bit more comfortable with failure, and again, just helping them reframe their mindset around what failure means, what does it look like, and what are the feelings that I should have as a student when things don't go well, especially like in a classroom or in an educational type of a setting. Sometimes as students, the expectation is I'm going to be graded or something, but these design challenges really help to allow students to sit in the comfort of failure, because chances are they're not going to get it correct the very first time. They will have to reiterate, they will have to plan again. But that is that is our intention, is to give them the opportunity to deal with those feelings and work through and persist through this through these failures. I want to go over a little bit on resources that we have developed for educators. We know at this point, because of COVID, everyone working remote, connecting with students online has become a challenge. Transitioning from in-person programs to virtual programs has been a challenge. So we've put together some resources to support educators as they want to test out some of the design challenges and implement them with their students. Okay, so let's start with some of the resources. I'm gonna shrink my, okay, let me go on to the resources. Here we go. this is the resource page that we've created for in partnership with STEMnext and for educators who are interested in learning a little bit more how to implement the design challenges with their students. One of the things that you could see here is the different sessions that we've done in the past with educators. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more or jumping into like what the process looks like, what are some questions I could ask some of my students, you'll definitely want to check out some of these slide decks or the recordings. And the other part here is, it's challenging getting to my screen here. We've developed design portfolios that you can use with your students, and this really just helps them to track each of the steps of the engineering design process, beginning like with what materials they will be working, how do they plan to solve the challenge they're being presented with. So these are different worksheets that you could use with your students. We have different versions of them, so you could peruse through them, see which one best fits your group, depending on the age group you're working with, what design, what type of questions work best for you. We've also developed a slide deck that you could use. So we have some educators who are doing these design challenges virtually, where the educator is leading, just like my colleague will be doing in a couple of minutes with our group, leading the entire students, like the whole class, through a design challenge. So this slide deck is something that your group could use, your students could type into the slide deck so that everyone can see and share each other's ideas. But again, these are resources that we've developed for you to use. And we've also listed here the design challenges, our top design challenges that use simple materials. So if you're interested in that, in order to access the design challenge catalog I was speaking about earlier, once you create your account on Curiosity Machine, and I think, Courtney, can you drop in the link where they could create their account? This is the catalog of design challenges I was speaking about earlier. You'll be able to see them separated by different topics. So all of these are accessible to you. All of the design challenges follow pretty much the same format. So you're seeing like the different tiles. This is the name of the design challenge, and then the actual challenge just listed here. So for example, for this one, engineer a structure that collects the most amount of water when it rains. If we click on that, one of the things that I love about this is one, we start off with an inspiration video. And this is part of what we've developed in partnership with scientists, real life scientists and engineers, where they get to talk a little bit about their work and how this specific design challenge relates to the real world. So it helps students make that connection. The other thing I really like about this is that it provides the suggested materials. On some of our design challenges, we've posted some pictures in the inspiration gallery. So if students want to take a look at what other students have built, going into view the challenge, if this is the challenge you want to do with your group, with your students, one of the things that all educators I recommend to take a look at for each design challenge that you want to run is the guide. So for all of our design challenges, we have posted a video of one way of how to solve the design challenge. So if you as a facilitator are stuck, like I don't even know where to get started, this is a good place to get started, just to give you an idea of one way to solve the challenge. And then we also have in this section the learn more, where we have additional videos and then breakdowns of some of the concepts that the design challenge is teaching young students. So again, all of the design challenges follow the exact same format, and this guide here is definitely something that helps facilitators and educators as they run the design challenges with their students. And again, as Sabrina mentioned, we do also have in this link the webinars recorded that we've run in partnership with STEMnext. And then preparing to facilitate, some of the questions that we get from educators are like, okay, so how do I prepare for each of these steps when I'm facilitating for students? One of the first things that I love sharing with educators is you don't have to be a science expert. the goal of the design challenges is not always to teach a science concept. Again, we're using science as a vehicle to teach other skills such as creativity, persistence, problem solving, right? So one, as an educator, don't feel the pressure that you need to be an expert at these science terms, but there's just a little bit more of preparation in terms of when I'm walking my students through the inspiration, for example, what are some questions that I could ask my students? What are some things that as a facilitator I should be doing? So for that, we have created a prep sheet for educators. So if you have any interest if you have interest in the design challenges, the facilitator design challenge planner is a good worksheet to start, at least just for you as a facilitator to start thinking. We could start here, list down the name of the design challenge you want to do, and first think about what's your objective. This is something that Sabrina talked about a little bit earlier. What is the objective? What do you want your students to walk away from this design challenge? Once you have determined that, what you're going to want to do is walk through each of the steps of the engineering design process and jot down what are some questions that I should be asking my students. If my students get stuck in the inspiration, what are some questions I could ask them? What are some books I could show them? What are some videos maybe that would be would be of interest to them so that they can make some connections? For the planning phase, what are some questions? What are additional resources I could share with my students? Building, testing, redesigning. So just thinking through each of these steps as a facilitator, thinking about where your students might be getting stuck, and forecasting a little bit where those challenges and hiccups might be for your students, so that you have some questions and open-ended questions for them to be, again, to encourage them to come up with their own solution. What we don't want to do is give them the answer. We want them to work through the challenge and come up with their own solutions. The other thing I wanted to share from this slide is define your goal. Again, like, what do you want your students to work with? I've done this design challenge with groups of students where the goal really was for them to just sit in the uncomfort of not knowing what to do immediately next. So in that, once we've moved from that, we've talked about, okay, well, ask some questions. What questions would you ask your fellow colleague who's also working on the same design challenge? Where do you want to get started? And again, just helping students persist through the unknown. And last but not least, here we've included and shared with you a sample 2-day schedule. So the design challenge does not have to be done in one day or in one session, even in 1 hour. We will be with my colleague, we will be doing a design challenge rather quick right now, just to give you a sample and a taste of what it is. But here is a sample of a schedule. You can spread out one design challenge over 2 days and take your time with each of these steps of the engineering design process. And then in case you get stuck and when things don't get hard, this is a slide you can definitely refer back to. Some questions you could ask along the way. Again, we're really trying to push a growth mindset, that developing that skill of being able to overcome challenges, persist through challenges, and envision multiple solutions to problems, all of that. So I am going to pass it over to my colleague who's going to walk us through one of these design challenges. Amy?
Sure. Hi, guys. So I'm going to talk a little fast and I'm going to try to do the design challenge rather fast, but stop me at any time or ask questions. I just want to add a couple of things to what Sabrina and Judy was saying, that, Sabrina made a very good point about there are a lot of great books and stuff that feature different women, people of color, and scientists and engineers. I think that's a great way to reinforce, but also I want to just emphasize that we do borrow that concept and try to feature scientists and engineers in our Curiosity Mission Inspiration video. We try to feature as many women as possible, as many people of color. So we do try to do that. I think that's a great role you can play. I know with everything being virtual, it's a little harder to get like real scientists or engineers in front of kids. So like some of the resources could be really helpful for you there. So I also want to just, before we go into the design challenge, I want to just take a moment to say design challenges can really be anything. In our website, Curiosity Machine, we do have over 100 design challenges, and we really try to cover as much different science and engineering fields as possible. But you can also come up with some on your own. When I was at the Girl Scouts, one of the design challenges we came up with, like, as you guys know, Girl Scouts sell cookies as one of their main primary source of income. So one of the design challenges we had was, how do you create a cookie container that can withstand a large drop, right? And that's a very easy thing. You use different materials like tissue paper, bubble wrap. One thing, if you're thinking about, if you have a little bit older students that you work with, they may be hearing about, vaccine distribution. It's like a really big topic that, the whole world is talking about today. And one of their challenges, how do you transfer something that's very cold a long distance? So you can come up with design challenges like, how do you make something that can hold ice, but the ice won't melt for many hours? And you can think about insulated materials, non-insulated materials, and things like that. So you can definitely even approach this as a way to like talk to your students and see if like what do they hear is a problem in their community, and see if you can come up with a design challenge together there. So Judy, if you want to go to the next slide. I'm not going to go over the engineering design process in too much detail. Sabrina talked about there's many different formats. Really, the idea is that they recognize that there's a problem and that they want to solve it using by planning, building, and testing, and then reflecting back on what they learned. I would say that oftentimes it's very hard to get students to plan. Even us as adults, sometimes we just want to start building, right? Our instinct is like, oh my God, I have materials in front of me, let me just start building. So whenever you come across that, well, my one recommendation would be is that if your students don't plan and document, like, I drew up my plan, I'm going to talk about it in a second. Oftentimes when things don't work, it's a little hard for you to know how to redesign. So scientists and engineers, I used to build microscopes as part of my job in graduate school. Like, I used to document every single piece of my equipment, because if something didn't work, that I knew that I could go back to there and swap up one thing instead of building things from scratch. And that's what a lot of engineers do as well. So I think in the prototyping process, we do really encourage kids to plan. And if they say, why should I have to do it? It's going to work the first time. Very rarely will the first product work. And it encourages them to, it really helps them redesign in the future. The other step I just want to take a moment to emphasize is the reflect piece. I think this is where you really talk about, did you meet the challenge goal? If you didn't, what didn't go right? What would you have done differently? Or sometimes it could even have been, I didn't have the right materials, or I didn't have enough time. All of those are constraints that scientists and engineers use in their thinking. So I think having kids think about that is very helpful. And I think it does also help them really connect that even failure is an important part of learning. And the goal is that, it's not that failure is a terminal state where like, okay, it didn't work, it's done, I'm done, I'm stupid. That's not the end goal, right? The end goal is that, okay, my machine didn't work this time, but maybe I needed to do X, Y, and Z differently so it could work the next time. So I think really facilitating that part of connection would really be your main goal. I love that Judy said that you don't have to be a scientist or engineer to do any of these, which is completely true. I think the main objective, if you can do, is be a role model in learning together. And then, I think also a big part is, I would also suggest maybe your prototype you build in front of your students doesn't work the first time. I think there's something really powerful about you as an adult who they look up to as an educator. Maybe theirs didn't work the first time, but you kind of role model, okay, maybe I needed to place another rubber band. Like, I think talking those things out loud really shows them that learning is a process, not just like it didn't work the first time and then it's done. Okay, Judy, if you want to go to the next slide. I'm going to go to the next slide. So we're going to make a machine that can jump more than 3 feet. It's a very simple challenge. I know we sent you guys a material list, just some cups, rubber band. I have some tape and scissors and a hole puncher. We'll get to that in a second. I'm working from home. I don't even have a yardstick, so I'm going to try to do this on camera. So this will be a little, hopefully work for all of us. If you want to go to the next slide, Judy. Okay, so I'm not going to show you the video, but we will send out the video links, and you can also find these on the Curiosity Machine. So I encourage you to do that. This design challenge is inspired by a biomechanics professor at USC. Her name is Jill McNick-Gray. And what she does is she actually works with Olympians and how to use physics to better perform. So for example, she works with divers. So how do you use your leg muscles better? How do you use your arm to create different torque, different movements? So you can actually be a better diver. She also works with volleyball players and how do you store potential energies in your leg muscle better so you can jump really high to block the ball. So she is she works a lot with different athletes, and this is a great way to connect to your students. I think a lot of our students play sports or do something very active, but they may not think about science playing a role in that. And her job as an engineer is actually training athletes to do this better. So in this video, you will see her talking about how do you store forces in your body, like your muscle in your legs. It's like a rubber band. It's going to store a lot of force, but how do you really compress that so you can make a larger jump? There's some funny demos you can try out. You know, if you don't bend your knees, can you jump? Or like by bending your knees more, can you jump higher? So they have some ideas around that. Susa, I think I encourage you to look at it. I'm also not going to show you the instructional video. Judy did show you where you can find it on the guide because I would like us to kind of build this without seeing the answer. I do recommend when you're working with students on building these design challenges, maybe you look at the instructional video to prepare for your session, but don't show it to the kids. Maybe you show it to them actually during the redesign process so that they can really get creative and think of other ways to do it. In our experience, oftentimes when you show a video or your own working prototype upfront, they tend to copy that and it minimizes their creative thinking. But if they're really stuck, of course, you can use that as an inspiration. In our instructional videos, we do try to show more than one different type of the machines that you build so that the kids see that there's not just one answer. We do our best to do that, but not in all of our videos. But I really do encourage you to talk to kids about different ways of building it. Okay, so let's see. What is it? Yeah. If you go to the next slide, I'm not going to talk about all of the physics that is behind this design challenge, but I copied and pasted what is on our website. So this is kind of the level of science explanation that we will show to you that on our website that you'll be able to see. The most important thing in this design challenge is thinking about potential and kinetic energy. So I want to actually ask a quick question and people can kind of answer it on the chat box. If you had two rubber bands, let me try to find two rubber bands, and one rubber band is very thick and one rubber band is very thin. I don't know if you guys can see, this is very thin and this one is pretty thick. Which one do you think can store more energy? Something that's thick or thin? Thick one, okay. Great. Yes, you guys are right. So the thicker ones have more rubber material that you can stretch further. And by stretching further, you're storing more potential energy in it. So when you let go, and my camera probably won't follow me, but if I let it go, most likely this thick rubber band will go further. So if you were doing this with students in a classroom, you can like actually fling rubber bands of different thicknesses and different sizes and try to, you can even stretch it a little bit or stretch it longer and like sort of show them that different rubber bands can store different amount of potential energy. And the other big thing I will want to emphasize is that this design challenge is all about finding a way to stretch the rubber band so you store potential energy and let it jump, meaning it converts to kinetic energy. So a good example is that you can think about is rubber band, obviously, but you can also do it with your legs. You can try to like, when you're standing up and then you bend down on your knees and then you try to jump up, that is an example of putting potential energy in your muscles and converting it to kinetic energy. Okay, so if you want to go to the next slide real quick. Okay, so you have various different materials. I'm going to do one that is very similar to what we have on the website. So I drew up my plan before while Judy was talking, so I want to save a little bit of time. So in my head, when I think about storing energy, I'm thinking I need to probably try to use a lot of rubber bands to find ways to store a lot of energy. So in my prototype, I drew myself a cup And I'm going to connect 2 rubber bands, kind of like a crisscross here. And once I'm going to figure out how to attach it to my cup. And I'm going to actually, by the way how I'm going to test it is I'm going to actually flip it upside down onto another cup that's sitting on my table and let it go and see if it jumps. So one thing I want to emphasize is that here I identified I wanted 2 rubber bands. You or your students may think about attaching like only 1 or maybe even 10. That's a constraint. That's a thing that you can think about. Maybe if you only have thin rubber bands, maybe you want to apply many of them to try to store more energy. Another thing that you should encourage your students to do is think about how do you want to test it. And I'm going to test it by flipping it over to a fixed cup, but you can also instead put this cup into this cup and see if that does it. So you can have different configurations of how you want to test. And I would encourage your students to try different ones and see which ones work better for them. So I am going to try to do this on camera, and if somebody can also give me a time warning when we get near the end of time. So first thing I have is I have a paper cup and I have a little hole puncher. And if people want to zoom in on me on their Zoom window, maybe they can see a little better. So it's just a simple hole puncher and a paper cup. I am going to punch 4 holes. And if you guys have the materials with you, I really encourage you to try to build along with me. That'll be fun. And if we can show our prototypes on camera, that will be also fun. Let me see. Okay, great. So I have four holes, if you guys can see. And then I have really long rubber bands I was able to find. So I'm going to actually cut these in half. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to attach my rubber band through these holes. This is where kind of thinking like an engineer could be really helpful is, so one way you can do it is you can have this rubber band. You see the rubber band in my cup, and you can just try to tape it, you know, is one way to do it, and then it will create some tension. One thing you might want to think about is when I push this down really hard, will my tape stay stable? That's one thing you can encourage your students. If they use tape, oftentimes it'll most likely the rubber band won't pop out, but that's okay. That's something that they're going to learn, and they're going to try different ways. I am going to actually try to see if I can knot it. One second. I'm going to actually show you guys what it looks like when I only attach one rubber band, and then I'll attach a second one and see if we can make it jump a little better. Okay. I have my cup with my rubber band. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tape this cup onto my table. And this is most likely because I've learned the hard way. If I don't do that, both cups will try to jump. It'll be hard for you to test it properly. So I've learned this through many failures of having done this design challenge. But if you want to try it with your students, maybe the first time you actually don't tape it and see what happens and talk about that with your students. Okay. Okay, can you guys see my cup? So this cup is fixed onto my table. Now I'm going to take this cup that has the rubber band in it, and I'm going to push it down. So by pushing it down, what I'm doing is I'm putting potential energy into my rubber band. It's stretching inside the cup. I'm going to let go. Let's see if it jumps. Whoa. Okay, so it jumped about a foot. I don't know if you guys can see it on my camera. I'm sorry, I have to go find the cup. Let me try it one more time. Let me see if you guys can see a little bit better. It jumped about to my face, so about a foot. So next thing I'm going to do is actually add another rubber band. And the goal here is that you have more rubber band to introduce potential energy, and then that will convert to larger amounts of kinetic energy. So give me 1 minute to try to do that. and we'll see if it actually works better.
And Amy, we have about 10 minutes before question and answer.
All right, thank you. We do this design challenge with kids as young as like 3 or 4-year-olds, and I even do this with graduate students. And I think this is oftentimes a really good one because the act of it actually jumping is very visual for kids to be able to see if it worked or not. And sometimes when you're introducing these hands-on activities for the first time, kind of adding that element of like, whoa, it jumped, like that really does help. So just as that, and I think if you guys, I know Judy and Sabrina will send out our contact information, but like, you're looking for ideas. I know there are some on the unit pages we created, but if you need additional ideas or you really like, I'm doing like an automotive design day, I'm looking for other ideas, like, you can always email us. We can kind of help you find ones that connect. So here, if you guys can see, now I have 2 rubber bands and it's a little bit harder for me to stretch in. That probably means that there's more potential energy that I can store. So let me see if I can make this go. Okay, let me also see if I can. Okay. Here we go. Whoa. Okay. So that jumped about 2.5 feet. Let me do it one more time, hopefully without spilling my water. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So it did jump more. So this is a good way of testing. So maybe if I wanted to really reach 3 feet, maybe I need to put another rubber band. Or another way you can think about is I've seen parents, families, instead of using just rubber band, they take a balloon. So, balloon stretches to be, so when you blow a balloon, it stretches. That's also a way that it adds potential energy. I've seen people try to cover the whole thing with balloons. So that's another way to do it. Let me just see. Judy, if you want to go to the last slide. Yeah, so I wanted to give you guys some redesign tips, and this is, in our opinion, very important for you. So not only have they were able to build something that works and test it and that's it, but what you really want to do is encourage your students to understand that it's a continuous process. So just because, engineers, in the late 1800s figured out how to make an automobile, right? Just because they figured out a combustion engine and put it on a small car, it doesn't mean engineering stopped, right? We continue to improve it. We continue to make adjustments. We continue to think about the environment, but also how to make it save gas or go faster. So these are all redesign ideas that we continue to improve on a product. And so you want to make sure, first thing I talk about is make sure that it's on a solid base for taping. Because what I learned is when I don't tape this, oftentimes both cups will try to move. And by doing that, now you're making 2 things move. So you're not able to make the one that you want to go higher. And I think another thing in this case is, can I get this to push all the way in? Because if by pushing it further down, I'm storing more potential energy in the rubber bands in the cup. And another thing you want to think about, have the kids think about is maybe the first time I tested it with the same one, I just pushed down a little bit, but then maybe the second time I push it down way, way hard. So how could you consistently test that? So we've had students think about maybe instead of my own hand pushing it down, what if I put a large textbook on top? So you can consistently apply the same force. So having the kids think about the testing is also important. I would say you can make it easier or harder. You can completely remove the cup. You can even make this with things like dowels and rubber bands. The goal really is thinking about what can store energy, what can potential energy, and what can actually make it move. So the conversion of potential energy to kinetic energy. So I think I'm going to stop and see if Judy wants to think about the last few slides, but we will be on for a Q&A, so
I wanted to invite everyone to our 3rd session that we're doing in partnership with STEM Next, and that's going to be on Thursday, December 10th. What we're doing is exploring a little bit more in depth these design challenges and the engineering design process. We have other after-school educators joining us, sharing with us. Some of them are already testing it with their students, sharing what's working, what's not working. most everyone has already expressed that some of the challenges they're facing is doing this online, doing this virtually. So a lot of conversations are happening around that. So if you would like to join us on December 10th, here's the link to register for that, and I will make sure to drop it into the chat. Sabrina?
I would like to ask everyone if you could please to just join me in thanking Judy, Ahumada, Amy Kim, and Sabrina Gomez for their excellent presentation. It is so hard to bring real examples and relevant examples, especially in the virtual field that we're in right now, and what a best practice, like what an excellent, excellent example this was. And the resources are so rich. If you did not have a chance to jump on and make your account with Curiosity Machine, please do so. I was going to try to post some resources as the presentation went on, and there were so many I just had to tune out because I felt myself getting pulled in. And they're amazing. And just a reminder at the beginning, we have the Million Girl Moonshot resources as well. I can add those back. So I would like to let everybody know that we have 20 minutes of Q&A. If you want to get technical and really ask questions, especially how this is successful remotely, I'll just invite you to do that in one moment. And I want to remind you finally that there is a QR code for evaluation on the main site. Your feedback would be appreciated. And it also allows you to be entered for door prizes. So if you have questions, feel free to please use the chat feature or the hand raise function, and then unmute your mic and go ahead and ask if your question is for Sabrina, for Amy, or for Judy. Thank you so much.
And we'll be here, so if you have questions, just unmute and ask away.
I can see in the chat now that people are very interested now in sending home cups and rubber bands. I think that's right on.
Yeah, I would say if people, I can just add a couple of things. We at our company, we try really hard to come up with design challenges that uses as much simple material as possible. We, for example, like First Robotics, their robotic kits are awesome, but we do also understand that not every learning environment is going to be able to afford that, or even it's hard to use kits like that with many children, right? Like you use it with a small group. So we do have, for example, a robotics curriculum around using simple Arduinos, but using like things like popsicle sticks and like fishing wires and things like that to mimic building a bird, for example. So we do work really hard to make it accessible. I think another great resource that if you're interested in, if you have a little bit older students and want to try things with like hardware and electronics, Spark Fund, for example, is a company that makes those, but they also offer scholarships for educators as well as free training. So we do try to share out as much resource as possible. We don't, we make all our curriculum and materials free on purpose because we want to be able to have more people be able to access it. So, and if sometimes you come across a design challenge and it seems like it's asking for something particular, you can always email our support email and see if there's alternative things you can use for it. We do have, if you guys are, I don't know if your school sessions are completely out, like, the after school program is completely done for December, but we have an activity called No Wire Circuit, and it's, you're building a very simple circuit using like a watch battery. And the only thing that you have to purchase that kind of, may not have at home is a simple LED. And oftentimes you can buy like 100 of them for like $3. And you use everyday materials like foil, pipe cleaners, like even a scissor, and try to build a circuit. We're adapting that to build your own Christmas card or even like make your own ornament. So there are ways to adapt it into your different settings and apply to even holidays and different environments you work with. But yeah, we hope we Not all of it is super easy to find, but we do try to find things that are easy to like find at home, recycled materials.
I also wanted to add, Amy, that on our resource page, we have curated some of the design challenges that have the simple materials. So if you're interested in that, definitely look at that resource page for the different design challenges that use the simple materials. The other thing I wanted to share was that in your resource page, those student portfolios, those trainings that are linked on there, they're applicable for any of the design challenge, not just the ones on the resource page. So once you create your account on Curiosity Machine and click on design challenges and see those over 100 design challenges and you want to use one of those, you could definitely use any of the templates that we've created in the resource page to help you, and the facilitator planning worksheet to help you prepare for the design challenge. So all of those resources are applicable to any of the other design challenges. The design challenges we've listed on the resource page, again, are just those that we felt like these are simple materials. These would be more accessible to everyone, but you're more than welcome to explore the catalog of design challenges on Curiosity Machine and use any of them.
Can I ask a question about the video content? I noticed we didn't quite get to it with Amy, but it was a female scientist, and I just wonder kind of about, I guess, showing students different kinds of scientists and maybe those who aren't regularly maybe represented in what they would see in a textbook book, or what they might think about, you know, a scientist is, you know, this only certain kind of person. And so I was wondering about the diversity in the video content.
Yeah, so that's something that we've been working towards, really showing diversity of, for example, when I was getting my PhD, I was the only female in my graduate program at the time. So I do think kind of, and role modeling, especially for younger children, is very powerful, right? Like I have a 3-year-old daughter, and then, I was just talking about how her 2 favorite Disney movies are Frozen and Moana, but like in her mind, princesses don't need to be rescued. Princesses have their own powers. Like even like at that young mind of 3-year-old, representation does matter, and what you see does have a really big impact. We do try really hard. Some of it is determined by who we partner with. Oftentimes, a scientist will get a grant, and then they will want to work with us to do so. So some of it is that when had a large project with Boeing, we created about 20 different curriculum units. And I would say about 50% of them feature female engineers at Boeing. And we do try to really do that. Another thing we try to do in our videos is that we try to humanize them, right? Sometimes because you may have never met a scientist or engineer, you may not know that as a kid, maybe they really, really like playing basketball, or maybe they were really inspired by playing Lego with their older siblings. So we do try to add that piece of what do they like to do, what inspired them to go into engineering. We've also tried to highlight some engineers who may have taken a little bit of an unusual path. Not everybody goes to college right away, knows they want to be an engineer, and then become an engineer. We have a couple of engineers we featured who, I think one was I forgot what his occupation was before, but we do try to encourage the people we feature to talk about that, because I think featuring that not everywhere's career path is this straight direct line is important. And I think it also makes it much more tangible for students to see that they can get there. So one thing I would also recommend is, as you guys are facilitating these sessions, one advantage of being a virtual session is that it's easier for people to volunteer with you, right? It's a little bit harder to get, an engineer exactly into your classroom at the exact time. Your after school program might have different background check, requirements and things like that. But I would encourage you to even, especially if you're doing this virtually, to see if there are like a local company where they have scientists or engineers that might want to just hop onto a call for 30 minutes. And you can just even ask them simple questions like, what did you like to do when you were in middle school? We're tasked to build this jumping machine. Like, what will you try? So like finding ways to get real scientists and engineers into your learning environment, that's something that I will, it would be great to kind of try to do. And I think being virtual in a way kind of makes it a little easier right now versus typically in a classroom, like it's a lot harder to get them in exactly at the time you need them to be. So I would really, there's a lot of big engineering companies in Alaska. And one advantage is you can even reach out to engineers who may be on the East Coast because, with time difference, they're already off of work. And so that's a great way. And I think you can look for volunteers to talk about this. Even college students, it's really helpful. If you in your local universities or even other universities, some of the chapters I will reach out to is SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. They're oftentimes a great network of college and graduate students who are Hispanic and Latino. There's also a NSBE, which is National Society of Black Engineers, or SWE, Society of Women Engineers. So a lot of your local universities may have these chapters, and they may love to engage with your students in a virtual way by calling in. We've had quite a few after school programs or even like Saturday programs that will do these things in collaboration with local universities, when we could do it in person. So those are great ideas. Yeah, but representation does matter. And I think we do try really hard to feature them. And I encourage you guys to also try to feature more role models into your programs.
So adding on to what Amy said, so as part of the Million Girls Moonshot Initiative, we are going to reach 1 million more girls with an engineering mindset through what we're calling 4 transformational program strategies. And one of the transformational program strategies is developing an engineering mindset, but another is the importance of role models, mentors, and families. And in this case, diverse role models, mentors, and families. And beginning in January, as part of the Million Girls Moonshot Initiative, we are going to be hosting monthly webinars focused on diverse role models and mentors. So I just dropped in the link, the site where any of you can go to this STEM Next Million Girls Moonshot webinar site. This is where we're constantly updating with our next webinars and past webinars. So you can visit or you can listen to recordings and see materials. But as part of the initiative, just like Amy said, there will be opportunities as part of the Alaska State After School Network to connect to companies and to connect to some of those diverse professionals in engineering, but also in STEM fields more broadly as well. So I encourage you to connect with the Alaska Statewide After School Network, get on their listservs, keep going to the STEM Next Million Girls Moonshot website to connect there.
Thank you again. We have just a few more questions or a few more moments for questions. If anyone has them, either in the chat function or by taking yourself off mute. And I will just put myself on mute so you can jump on in.
Courtney, I just want to say thank you so much for hosting this also. Tremendous help. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I hope that next time we can see you guys in Alaska. I would
love to go.
It would be really awesome to see you up here. So thank you all for your time and for sharing your professional expertise. We are so excited about STEM in Alaska and what Thomas has started to do and advertise with Million Girl Moonshot. And we are in a very amazing state to explore and do this work. And so I know that you've inspired everyone on the call. I know that people are signing up for all of the resources. So just many thanks to you, and happy holidays as we kind of move into that season. I hope that you are well and stay well. And if anybody has a final for the thoughts for the chat, thank you for your very kind wishes there as well.
I just had one thought. In the very beginning, I kind of missed a portion. So where are you guys located at?
Well, I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia,
Okay.
but the STEM Next Opportunity Fund is based in San Diego.
Okay. Thank you.
Judy and I are based in LA, but our company is mostly remote, and we work with about 80 different countries a year. So we're pretty widespread in who we work with, but we mostly work with volunteers and educators like you guys to really take the curriculum and bring it to your setting. So,
Okay, I'm excited. Thank you.
yeah, welcome. I just want to make one last plug, which is I know we do have quite a bit of nature-related design challenges as well on our website that will really work very well with like middle school age groups. So I know it may relate a little better to some of your students in Alaska, and then the natural setting. We work with national parks to develop a few of them. So please explore and reach out to Judy or I if there's any questions.
Hey, I'm glad. Chelsea, I'm glad. And everyone else.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I wish everyone a great afternoon or evening on the East Coast, and we hope to hear about your awesome STEM work in the future.
Have a good Thanksgiving holiday, everyone. Be safe, be well.